Good afternoon and welcome to the August webinar for Community IT Innovators titled, We Are All Data Managers, Learn How to Up Your Game. This month's webinar is presented in partnership with Build Consulting. Before we get started on the webinar, here are a few housekeeping notes. Please interact with us by asking questions via the chat feature in GoToWebinar or by connecting with us via Twitter. During the presentation, avoid multitasking. You may just miss the best part. And finally, links to the recording and slides will be shared after the webinar. Now, a little bit about Community IT and Build Consulting. We both work exclusively with nonprofit organizations to help them make information technology and information systems decisions that support their mission. We have a collaborative approach, empowering our clients to make informed choices for their organizations. My name is Peter Miras, and I'm a partner at Build Consulting. At Build, I serve nonprofit organizations as a part-time Chief Information Officer and a project leader for data and technology initiatives. Clients I've worked with include such as the Humane Society of the United States and NeighborWorks America. Build Consulting leads in the social goods sector by providing three types of services. We serve as part-time or interim Chief Information Officers for nonprofits. We perform business process technology and data projects ranging from strategic assessments and technology roadmaps to system selections and implementations. And with Build Teams, we provide outsourced data managers with deep development operations experience and nonprofit CRM expertise. So before we talk about how to become better data managers, a good question is to ask why all nonprofit staff members fit into this category of data manager. And the answer is in ways both large and small, every person working at a nonprofit shares some data management responsibility. Whether you're in development, programs, finance, HR, IT, the executive office, or any other department, you've got to manage data effectively. Managing data could be entering data and keeping it up to date, or running imports, exports, or reports. But it could also mean just conducting the kind of operations that create the environment for good data management, from building an organization's culture to hiring the right people, designing and managing a program or a campaign, or simply properly executing a process that leads to a good outcome. So like it or not, we're all data managers, and we all have skills that we need to develop that go along with that. And as data managers, what are the skills we need to up our games? That's going to be the focus of today's presentation. And I'm going to show you 6 steps to becoming a data management ninja. I'm going to spend about 15 minutes on the presentation, and then we can use the remainder of the half hour to answer any questions that you might have. So first of the 6 steps is to learn the nonprofit landscape. When you don't know how all parts of your nonprofit work, it's more difficult to put your own data management efforts into context. And if you don't learn how nonprofits work in general, it is hard to bring important outside perspective to your own organization and to your own role in data management. If you're only aware of your own little piece of the landscape, it's harder to understand how it connects to the other pieces. Understanding more of the full context will help your own data management responsibilities seem more connected, helping you to make better decisions and provide motivation for the tediousness of carefully managing your piece of the data, no matter how large or how small, or no matter what your role. One book I found particularly helpful in understanding how nonprofits work is called the Jossie Bass Handbook of Nonprofit Leadership and Management, which you can get on Amazon. It's a bit of an academic read, but it describes nonprofit leadership and governance, operations, developing and managing financial resources, and leading and managing people. But there are many other books, articles, blog posts, and webinars about the nature of nonprofits and how they function in modern society. You can find them just by doing a Google search. And I recommend just starting to get a little bit more of a picture in your mind about what nonprofits are, how they function, what best practices are out there, how your organization uses those best practices and applies them to its own mission. The second step is I call it understanding the relationships. Data is basically all about relationships. In data management, you always have at least two things, and you're trying to understand the relationship between them. Let's take the example of the environment. So much of our work on environmental issues is focused on humankind's relationship to the world around us and the desired outcome of bringing that relationship into proper balance. So in that example, humankind is the first thing, the environment is the second thing. The data we collect describes the things themselves and the give and take relationship between the two. We need to learn about and understand the relationships our nonprofits engage in, as well as the desired outcomes. Let's say that you are interested in better management of donor data. The first thing to ask yourself is, who are our donors? What relationship do we have with them? What are their needs and expectations? What do they provide to us and what do we provide to them? In other words, what is the two-way exchange within the relationship? And from there, you can start asking yourself what data you need to understand, support, and grow that relationship. The third step to becoming a data ninja or data management ninja is to learn your technology. People can spend hours and hours trying to accomplish data management tasks that could be accomplished in minutes with better knowledge of their technology. Software companies often make a wealth of information available about their products' features in the form of briefings, blog posts, webinars, community forums, and more. And make sure to leverage the support provided by your vendor to get answers and find resources. With a little more knowledge of the technology, you might learn the report that takes 10 hours to produce only need take 10 minutes. I suggest you make a list of the software you use to manage data, including everyday ordinary tools like Microsoft Office. Do some Googling to identify the best resources available to meet your learning style. Once you've created that list, pick a place to start and set some goals for yourself. For example, this week I'm going to spend time reading an article on how the campaigns feature works in my CRM system. Next week, I'm going to watch this short video on how to remove duplicates from a list in Excel, and so on. There are a lot of great tips and tricks you can pick up out there and processes for tools you use every day that you might not even be aware of. And yes, the example I provided earlier about it taking 10 minutes to produce a report that had previously taken 10 hours is an example from real life. A client of ours learned that there was a button they could push to pretty much just produce the report instantaneously that they had been manually putting together over the course of more than a day. The fourth step is to become a data quality nerd. High quality data is something everybody wants, but very few people have. Everybody should get a little bit nerdy about data quality because this is something where everybody needs to work together. But hey, data quality is cool. Becoming a data quality nerd is chic. You get a little knowledge to help inform your perspective, and then you can wow your friends and colleagues with data quality bombs like, hey, did you know there are 6 dimensions of data quality? Completeness, accuracy, validity, consistency, timeliness, and integrity? If you're interested in taking a dive into this subject, you can watch the webinar from 2015 that we produced titled How Data Quality Defines Your Organization. And a link to that webinar's recording and links to the other resources I mentioned will be available at the end of this presentation. And it will be available in the slides that we make available after the fact. The fifth of the 6 steps to becoming a great data management ninja is to become a great communicator. Clear communication about data and the data management process is critical to avoiding mistakes that lead to data inaccuracy. Communicating clearly about data priorities and processes, then listening and implementing feedback as a team is extremely important. Data management is never perfect, just like data is never perfect, just like the things that the data describe in the real world are never perfect. But without these critical conversations taking place inside our organizations, how will we improve data management outcomes? Data management and how to get better at it should be a part of the open dialogue of an organization. So do your part where you can to contribute. Learning how to communicate clearly in business environments can be learned by reading simple articles like 5 Ways to Communicate More Clearly from Inc. magazine and 6 Ways to Clearly Communicate Complex Information from QuickBase. And time again over the course of my career, I've seen people in various roles within organizations definitely step them up their game by learning how to communicate more clearly and fully about data in email correspondence. That's a very critical thing. And the sixth and final step to becoming a data management ninja is to become a super sleuth. Good data management at times relies on problem solving, sometimes requiring complex logic. It can really challenge your investigative skills. And you're going to be asking questions like, why does that active donor count look weird? And then you do some investigation and it turns out, oh, we included deceased donors in the report. You might ask, why did the report numbers for August program activity change so dramatically? What happened? Oh, it turns out a program manager batch imported more activity for August in November. So many people at nonprofit organizations see something that looks a little bit strange to them, and then they just let it go by. But you shouldn't wonder why and then let it go. Put on your detective hat and figure it out. There are numerous articles on how to approach problem solving or troubleshooting, including at such resources as mindtools.com. But I would suggest you start by asking yourself these two questions. One, do I take the time to thoroughly define the problem that I'm experiencing or another is experiencing and its impact? And two, when I'm investigating a problem, do I take notes on what I have reviewed, discovered, and attempted? The data management ninja becomes a more valued employee and contributes to better mission outcomes. If you become good at your part in data management, whether that part be large or small, you'll become a more valued employee because you will provide your organization with skills that not enough people have the care or ability to develop. If your organization becomes better at data management because of your contributions, you'll be doing that much more to help make the world around you a better place. So again, these are the 6 steps to becoming a data management ninja. Learn the nonprofit landscape, understand the relationships, learn your technology, become a data quality nerd, become a great communicator, and become a super sleuth. Now, under each of those headings that we just reviewed, there are a lot of different things that you could do, of which I've only provided a few examples to learn how to improve your skills. And if you're feeling somewhat overwhelmed by all of the skills that you might need to develop to become a top flight data manager, in addition to taking care of whatever responsibilities you have in your role at your organization, don't worry. I often say to my clients, Rome wasn't built in a day, but parts of it were. So pick one thing to focus on, like improving your communication skills. Be open with your colleagues about what you are trying to do and get their feedback on how effective you are being. When you feel natural and comfortable with your new skills in that area, go ahead and move on to the next thing. And here are some of the resource links that I talked about. The Jossie Bass Handbook of Nonprofit Leadership and Management, our webinar on how data quality defines your organization, one of the 2 articles that I mentioned that will help provide some tips about clearly communicating information, and the site mindtools.com, which has a wealth of information that helps about creative problem solving. Now I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about the subject, about data quality in general. If you have anything, go ahead and put it into the chat. I know that there were some questions that were positioned before from registrants, so I'm happy to get into those as well. I'll just pause for a quick moment and see if anything comes into the chat window. Nothing popping up right away, so I'm going to go ahead and discuss a couple of points based on some questions that we got in advance of the presentation. We got a number of questions that revolved around this basic theme. How do you get everyone in an entire organization to recognize and fulfill their roles as data managers and users? And particularly for organizations with very limited staff resources. I think that is a matter of primarily education first and foremost, so that people understand how the poor data management decisions and in each person's role result in poor outcomes for the organization. And also it's a byproduct of leadership. I think that good data management and making that a part of everybody's individual role or an embedded part of their job description is a lot about leadership and how that forms the culture of the organization. If you're interested in reading more about the subject, you can go back and look at the Build website at thisisbuild.com and see some of our past blog posts and articles that speak to governance and improving operations. Another question was, how do you ensure enough data is being entered, not too little, making it worthless, and not too much so no one is overwhelmed? That's a great question. A lot of organizations are overwhelmed by the vast amount of data that they can or might be able to collect about their activities, about their donors, etc. And when you have so many different data points that you need to manage, how can you make sure to do it all effectively? And I guess there's an old axiom that reads, would you rather have a large quantity of low quality data or a small quantity of high quality data? And I think that the answer is of course you want high quality data and you want as much data as you can manage. And part of that is about human resource and budgetary constraints. So I think you start with the relationship question that I posed earlier, because it is all about the relationships. We used two examples earlier, one about the relationship between humankind and the environment, which is very broad, of course, and then another example of the relationship between your organization and your donors. And one of the things that I find is that really taking a look at that relationship and what's expected in a two-way exchange of value in that relationship helps you understand what data you must have in order to fulfill your quote-unquote obligations within that relationship. And then you can look beyond that more opportunistically at other data points that might help to produce new opportunities for your organization if you were able to learn a little bit more, manage a little bit more data that might indicate where other opportunities might be present, etc. Also, don't underestimate the fact that there's a lot of opportunities for data automation these days, keeping data up to date through data services, particularly data about constituents. So you're not constantly having to manually maintain that information. You can get sort of a sense of what that information is by using a data service to discover household income, to validate or update addresses, etc. There are also opportunities to collect representative information about constituents through surveys rather than maintaining that data point on each individual constituent record as another example. So you might pull a representative section of your donor base or your constituent base and take the lessons learned from that and apply that to your strategy rather than having to collect and maintain that information about every single constituent. So those are a couple of ideas that I introduced to folks who are trying to prioritize what data they can and should manage with their resources and try to figure out what's the right balance between having too little worthless data and too much so that it's just totally overwhelming for people to stay on top of. Another question is, do you have any suggestions for resources for communicating more effectively? We don't have an internal communications function. That's a good question. I touched on some of them. Mindtools.com has a lot of information about that. There's a lot of information online about communicating more effectively, both internally for internal communications, ranging from communicating about your brand and culture internally to just better day-to-day communications practices. We take a look at a lot of different sources for that, informing our own internal practices and constantly striving to be better. We look at Inc. magazine, we look at Harvard Business Review, we look at resources that are produced by communications associations that focus on internal communications. And then there are also a number of resources out there for communicating externally. And an aspect of communication in regards to data that I didn't focus on in this particular presentation was about communicating about data to external audiences, basically telling stories with data. Another question that we got is what role does data governance play? Can you share some examples of successful approaches to data governance? Data governance is extremely important. Having a good information strategy and goals and priorities and standards for data and data ownership inside your organization, defined roles and responsibilities and standards for quality is important. That's something that can be proposed at a number of different levels inside of the organization, but information governance or data governance as a whole really starts at the top. And we've learned over the course of our careers that when leadership is effectively engaged on this issue and consistently engaged, it makes all the difference in terms of data quality. And leadership also needs to walk the walk if they're going to talk the talk. If you have leadership that's talking a lot about data quality and then blatantly ignoring its own data quality standards in their own practices, it can have a real deteriorating effect on people's motivation to maintain high quality data because it is drudge work at times, and it can sometimes feel like it's taking you away from what you really got into the nonprofit space to do. Another question is, I'm a leader within my organization. Everyone seems to be on the same page about how important data is, but we don't get anywhere in practice. How can I get this so it's more actionable? That is a great question. And I think the answer to that is it's important, again, for leadership to take a role in this, to set up the strategic initiatives and the working committees and the working groups that sort of carry forward the dialogue about data inside of the organization. And I think it's important to have a theme to pivot off of. And it's good to try to have that theme be mission connected if possible. One of the ways that data is important to an organization is because it helps tell the story of the organization more effectively. And usually, when you are able to tell the story of your organization more effectively, it helps to further your mission by bringing more people to your person's eyeballs, to your cause, by bringing more dollars into the mix to help fund your initiatives, etc. So oftentimes that's the pivot. You want to get out there and tell the story, and that story is in part not just anecdotal, but it's about data as well, and using those key data points to really drive home to critical audiences the value that you're producing in this space. So I would say it's a combination of leadership, setting the tone and starting the initiative. And if they need any assistance in that or learning how to get that going, they can certainly reach out to Build Consulting and get some ideas or engage us in a project to help do that. And then we can help build the capacity inside of the organization to really take leadership around data management, data quality, and then help to translate that into practices for the organization. So starting with leadership, moving on to management, and then having it work through all the different levels of the organization. Another good question, we had a couple of people ask questions about how to better manage and understand organizational data and files being saved in the cloud with services like OneDrive, Dropbox, systems like that. So these are more document management systems, file sharing systems, and for assessing possible new structures to help organize that information better and make it more discoverable. This is a really hot topic for a lot of our clients. We just did a box.com technology and sort of organizational review for a client. And there are certainly ways to develop organizational taxonomies and structures in those systems like OneDrive, Dropbox, Box.com, etc. It'd be great to have a follow-up conversation with whomever asked those questions specifically to get a little bit more knowledge about their particular situation. But we're happy to engage on that. There are ways that you can go about determining how to establish a categorization structure in our working file classification or organization system that just keeps things from going nuts and being the place where files go to die, basically. Okay, so we have another question about, we have a bunch of systems that have data in them, but they don't talk to each other. And so I feel like they are all siloed. Is this a governance problem, and would a governance committee help? That's another great question. And if you're in that situation, you're not alone. A lot of nonprofits have difficulty integrating their data, in part because departments don't want to deal with integration issues that would cause them to get distracted from what their primary focus is, and in part just because it's a challenge within the nonprofit space to get systems integrated at a meaningful level. So the first thing to do is talk about what the potential strategic and operational gains are in having tighter integration. And maybe if you don't feel comfortable taking that on as a broad subject, you could focus on one particular area and establish a use case around it. So for example, if you're using two products even from the same vendor like Blackbaud, like the Razor's Edge and Illuminate Online, which are a donor management CRM system and a marketing automation platform respectively, you might want to get constituent information shared across the two systems. But the tools that Blackbaud provides for that purpose are not very high quality, so you have to go with third-party solutions. And so understanding how to do that, how to define your data model on both sides and map it together is something that can be costly. It doesn't necessarily have to be. So it requires leadership to acknowledge the need to invest in that initiative. But it's also an area where you can take a small use case, say what it would take to integrate at this particular level, and then expand that out more broadly. Again, it has a lot to do with the specifics of each individual client. We're happy to have follow-up conversations with anybody that finds themselves in that situation and has maybe just even a question about how to move the ball forward about integrating disparate data systems. It's something we work in a lot. So whether it's Blackbaud products or Salesforce, we sort of help facilitate and strategize for how those conversations about integration need to take place, what the benefits are, and then we help line up vendors who can really do a good job supporting your integration and put you in a position to maintain that over a prolonged period of time. I think we have one final question that's coming in, and that is, our IT director keeps talking about Zapier, which she calls middleware, and she thinks that's going to solve a bunch of problems. What's your experience with middleware helping to solve these types of problems, and also who normally manages Zapier? Okay, that's kind of a loaded question. Zapier is a great tool for quickly integrating multiple different systems together, sometimes in more limited ways and sometimes in more complete ways. So for example, if you had a registration form on your website that was provided by MailChimp or some other marketing automation platform, and you wanted to have that automatically create a new contact record in your CRM system like Salesforce, you could use Zapier to do that. It's pretty quick to spin up. It doesn't require a lot of technical ability. Typically, that's been within the purview of IT, but in a lot of our organizations, we see a lot of individual tech-savvy department folks trying to spin up these integrations. And I think it's just appropriate to keep everybody on the same page. We're far past the point where IT has become the sole dispenser of technology to the organization. Technology is so self-service these days that that's not going to be the case, and individual departments are sometimes going to want to take matters into their own hands, and with modern technology, they'll be able to. But having a cohesive information strategy, a good plan, good data governance helps keep everybody on the same page, helps determine whether Zapier is appropriate as a solution or whether it's one of the other middleware solutions that are out there that perform a similar function, or whether or not a more complete, sophisticated integration tool is necessary. And again, that's just an area where you have a problem and you do your investigative work. Zapier might be a good solution. It might not be for a variety of different reasons. There also might be other solutions out there that your organization hasn't found but are within reach and affordability that could address those kinds of issues. So Zapier is cool. It's very helpful. It's by no means, generally speaking, a tool for doing complex integrations between two complex data models in our experience. And a lot of times for our clients that are using more nonprofit market-specific solutions, Zapier just doesn't have tools to connect with their systems. Well, it's 4:31 and this is a half an hour webinar, so we're out of time for today. But I really appreciate all of the folks that participated in this webinar. We had great registration and participation, a lot of great questions. If there was a question about that you didn't get answered, feel free to use the contact form or on the Community IT website, or send an email to myself, which we can post with the end of with the slides and the webinar, and you'll all get an email about that. We haven't quite nailed down the webinar topic for next month yet, but those who are registered for the Community IT newsletter will get a message announcing that at some point in the near future. So thanks everyone for participating again, and have a great evening.